Get the best bottles online for any occasion at getwineonline.com. Get 20% off when you click the banner at the bottom of the FBIA podcast website. Everything from big case orders to single bottles of Merlot or Chardonnay. That's FBIApodcast.com and click the banner at the bottom of the page.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Football is America with Ron and Kyle. I'm Ron.
And I'm Kyle, and today we are joined by Brian Naidus, staff writer from the Phinsider.com, hilarious, which is the Dolphins team page and blog page from the SB Nation community. Brian is here today, obviously, to discuss the Dolphins. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
Now, Brian, first thing we need to know about you is how long have you been a fan of the team?
I have been a fan of the Miami Dolphins since birth, 27 years. I've been through the ups, mostly the downs, and here I am, stronger than ever.
All right, and what is it that kind of drove you to being a pro and writing for this page? Is that just enjoying the community, pure fanaticism on your part, needing more information?
I just love football. I've always had my sports teams and everything, but I've just always loved the game. My dad got me into the Dolphins as he became a fan watching, the undefeated seasons. Unfortunately, I was not around for that, living in the past for the most part. But I've just always loved football. I wanted to know more about it. I've been interested by it. I like, reading and learning more, about defensive schemes and, the difference between a 4-3 and a 3-4 defense. So I came across the website that I became writing for, the Phinsider, and found a good community, found a nice niche, and I've been kind of writing for them for the last few years.
All right, and one last semi-personal question to go on with what we got. What is your strongest memory of the team? Good memory, bad memory, doesn't matter, and I will say that Ace Ventura does count.
Ace Ventura has got to be up there. He's got to be a consideration. I would have to say I have probably a few that come to mind, maybe my top three moments. I was actually in attendance on our last playoff win. Lamar Smith had I want to say 25, 26-yard rushing touchdown in the playoffs, actually against your Colts, I think. And that was our last win in overtime. And it was just a great run. I was in attendance. The crowd went wild. I haven't seen anything like that for quite a while, which is somewhat a little bit sad, but that was a great memory. I would say beating the Jets in Week 17 to get our 2008 AFC East crown was awesome, just because the Patriots were nowhere to be found for once in the last decade. That felt great. And I know it's going to be a sleeper, but if you talk to any diehard Dolphins fans who stuck with the team through the good and bad, you have to really make an effort to put Greg Camarillo's catch in overtime against the Ravens to preserve a defeated season, give us that one win. So you wouldn't have think, from an outsider's perspective, everyone was laughing at us, but it felt so good to get that one win. And we're still trying to bring our franchise around, from that victory. But I would say those three are the ones that come to my mind as far as my top Dolphins moment that I can remember and, vividly have a distinction from. So
I definitely understand when you're having a down year and it's looking like you're going to have nothing in the wins column to get that one win. Oh, it's like the playoffs.
It felt great.
Like, oh, thank you so much. We are not RoboCop City out there 0-16.
Exactly. No, it was a good feeling, to be a fan of the sport and just get that, even though we knew we were hopeless, we were 1-15, we would get the 1 seed, just 0 0-16 just sounds so bad. Just to be able to not be part of that history, especially because I know the Dolphins would have been, they would have told, hey, the only defeated and undefeated team. So we put that monkey off our backs, and it was a big moment to be a Dolphins fan, and a little glimmer of hope for that miserable year.
All right, well, we have a lot to get into when it comes to the 2014 season and then subsequently the offseason. And let's just dive in with the Dolphins have had their moments, but it just cannot seem to get over that hump and challenge the Big Brother Patriots for the division. They have been through a complex casting call of QBs and running backs and coaches. This year is already starting to look more promising with the offseason moves. But before we get to all of those, let's talk 2014. Can you give us your thoughts on the season, what the successes were, if any, and your overall opinion was of the season? Was the season a success? How did you feel about it?
It felt more of the same for a lot of Dolphins fans, including myself. Like you said, we have been a fairly optimistic bunch in every offseason because the Dolphins are the team that does go out and make splashes. We give a lot of credit to our owner, Steve Ross, who's not afraid to, open up his checkbook and help the team. And I acknowledge that and realize that he's the biggest fan as we are, and he wants to see our team win. But, it always seems to, when the second half of the season rolls around, there's just always something. Last year, I feel that the injury bug was not as kind to us as it was in years past, and we looked like a completely different team. Our defense in the middle of the season was looking like shades of elite. We had, great players and great, a defense from all sides of the ball, and a couple injuries later, and it just seemed more of the same. It was fairly disappointing, just because we saw flashes from Tannehill, which was the only good outlook, I would say, from last year. Is for the first time in a long time for Dolphins fans, we actually came together as one, and for the most part think that we do have our quarterback to build around. So that mixed with a lot of the disappointment, with kind of the silver lining of a fairly disappointing year, because we did have some talent, but we were all pretty apparent that we still are a few pieces away to actually be a contender.
Now, as you said, Ryan Tannehill he's starting to get that feel to him that maybe he really is the franchise level quarterback that the team needs. And he's been very unique in that normally a prospect is either regarded as successful or unsuccessful. And for a lot of people, if you say, well, what about Ryan Tannehill? It's a genuine, you know what? I don't know. He's not good enough to sign off on him, and he's not bad enough to kick him to the curb. And we're now seeing him take these steps and really come into his own and be a bit more of a leader and developing the confidence. It's not fair that he's had to be compared to Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson and Robert Griffin, but I mean, that's where it's at. And you're getting to watch this now. I mean, he's not going to be a Dan Marino, obviously, but do you think he can lead this team into a deep playoff run?
Yes. Like you said, you have to, what we saw last year in our new offensive coordinator, in his first 2 years, he was under his offensive coordinator since college, and Mike Sherman. Mike Sherman ran a very conservative offense. It was very frustrating for Dolphins fans to watch Tannehill in that offense. He was trying to develop Tannehill into a quarterback that he wasn't, more of a pro-style quarterback. Tannehill is not going to be a Peyton Manning. He's not going to be a Tom Brady. That does not mean that he cannot be a successful quarterback. That does not mean he cannot be an elite quarterback. Just as we saw with Russell Wilson, who is, the term game manager is thrown a lot around Russell Wilson. Well, Russell Wilson obviously had an elite team around him, obviously had an elite defense around him, but he was able to, fulfill the ultimate goal, which is to bring home the Lombardi Trophy. We talked about on our site, if Ryan Tannehill was in a situation and instead of Russell Wilson, do we feel that Ryan Tannehill could have won a Super Bowl in Seattle? And for the most of us thought that he could. You have to just play Tannehill to his strengths. He's fits well, which we saw last year in Bill Lazor's offense. That the zone read quarterback. He's very dangerous with his legs. He's tough. He's durable. He hasn't missed an entire game since he started. Knock on wood. But I feel, to answer your question, yes. I mean, you have to build around him, and he's not the type of quarterback that's going to win with little around him like a Tom Brady. But just because he's not a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning does not mean that he cannot be a successful or an elite quarterback in the very near future.
Well, I will agree that Tom Brady wins with whatever he has. I'm not quite ready to say he does it with little around him. I think he does it with good players who have been routinely undervalued. But that might just be my bias against Tom Brady rearing its head. So, back to Tannehill. Does he have the full support of the fans at this time? I mean, it's a difficult thing to live in Marino's shadow, but that's where he's at, and he's stuck it out and kept playing pretty good ball. Do the fans now support him as their quarterback and the guy they have their trust in?
He took a big step last year because a lot of fans, including myself, didn't really have any allegiance to him prior to last year. We selected him where a lot of the scouts and mocks and everything had us reaching for him, whatever that means. But even in his tape, I wasn't too sold on him becoming our next quarterback when we drafted him, just because he was so raw. There was not really, you weren't able to formulate a quarterback and just watch 2 or 3 of his throws and say, oh, yeah, he's the one, or, oh, no, he's going to be a bust. Obviously, no one really can do that, but the jury was out. And then, when we brought him in, we traded Brandon Marshall, so he never had a chance to catch any balls from Tannehill. Our receiving core the first year was pretty underwhelming. And then as time progressed and he was able to learn the offense, obviously it was Mike Sherman's offense. It was very conservative. He wasn't really playing Tannehill, but Tannehill still showed flashes of being able to become a good quarterback one day. So it was very torn. And then last year he did. He took a big step that we were all looking for him to take. I had no allegiance to him. I was expecting a good year for him. And if he didn't put up good numbers and he didn't show me on the field that he is ready to make that step, I was one of the fans that were willing to, explore other options. In my mind, and most of the Miami Dolphins fans, he did. He did take that next step. He's shown us that he can be a quality signal caller in the NFL and, put together a nice year with 4,000 yards and a bunch of touchdowns, limited his turnovers and his fumbles, which were plaguing him the first couple of years, and was able to work out of the pocket. And still obviously has work to do, but he's starting to excel at underneath routes, and the emergence of Jarvis Landry as our slot guy has helped him kind of develop a good repertoire with him. So to answer your question, yes, I think he is ready to make that next step and kind of carry on from his first regarded successful season, I would say.
With the fans behind Tannehill, that's definitely great. I have to assume that they are not quite as firmly behind head coach Joe Philbin, though, because he has kind of led this team on a roller coaster ride, just ups and downs all over the place. One minute he seems to be brilliant. The next minute you kind of wonder how he puts his shoes on in the morning. What is going on with Joe Philbin? I mean, would you say that he is definitely the head coach that you want now, or is he just there until he finally gets sent away?
Well, it's a good question, and I think this year has a lot to do with answering that question. Philbin's one of those guys he's just tough to put a nail on. He's very, anticlimactic. And the main thing when it comes to Philbin is answering the question, what exactly does Joe Philbin do? And when you put it that way, it's tough to, put a number on it. A lot of people said Joe Philbin hasn't really done anything with the team but call bonehead timeouts and, lose games. And it's really tough to argue something like that. I think we're all kind of deep down rooting for him, but Dolphins fans and probably most NFL fans nowadays aren't really a patient bunch, between the media and everything spewing things out. And it's tough to be a player in the league, and it's even tougher to be a fan in the league. So I would say Philbin's been on thin ice. If he would have been gone last year, I don't think he would have been a surprise by any means. We're kind of just still trying to figure out as Dolphins fans what exactly Joe Philbin does, between calling plays and everything. Our coordinators were pretty content about, our defensive coordinator is still kind of in the mix, but we did get riddled with injuries on the defensive side of the ball last year. But Joe Philbin's a tough one to handle, and this is one of those years where, he's got his last year. He hasn't been extended or anything. Stephen Ross gave him the kind of the green light for 2015. We made all these moves, which I'm sure we'll be talking about in a second. And it's going to come down to, if we don't probably make the playoffs or have a very successful season and, make a claim to be the heir apparent of the AFC East, we might be looking at Philbin. And then it comes down to, if, Philbin's gone, is Tannehill even going to be the quarterback of the future? Because he's still not under contract after this year as well. So we're all hoping for him and crossing our fingers and hoping everything comes out the way we expect it to. But, we have been spurned before as Dolphins fans.
And as you said, there's been a lot of Philbin on the hot seat. He's definitely not secure in his position. And I don't even know if he necessarily cares. The thing that really struck both Ron and myself last year was he was told he will be back for the 2015 season. And a lot of excitement. Great. Fine. It's better to keep going and be certain as to whether or not he should be gone as opposed to getting rid of him prematurely. And then the last game of the season, the team just went out and played poorly. They did not seem to care. Yeah, and it seemed like Philbin was just there on the sideline like, what do I care? I'm getting paid, man. I do my thing. And that is a big concern, that he didn't want to end with as positive a record as possible. So, I mean, does he have the drive to win? Like, deep down, do you believe that he is one of the people who can't go to sleep at night because he is just so consumed with a competitive spirit and just this drive to be better than everyone else? Because from the outside looking in, it does not look like he is that guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to speak for him, but I mean, personally, I haven't seen it. And I expect, as a fan, I expect certain credentials and requirements from my players. I like to have a player who wants to win. We were all impressed with the energy that, Jarvis Landry showed as a rookie last year, has, his passion and how fired up he gets. And then you get old Joe on the sideline, who just doesn't really show any emotion either way. So I think we expect a lot from our players, but, there's no reason why we shouldn't put Joe Philbin in that category as well. I'm expecting a lot from Joe Philbin. He has a lot of good pieces around him this year. He's put together a very underwhelming last 3 years, even with an up-and-coming quarterback. And I want to see some fire from him as a fan. I want to see him be able to motivate a lot of our players. I know every time we've gotten any, loud or not loud, but any player has spoken up, it seems that they don't last the next season. When Philbin first came in and everyone was watching the Miami Dolphins on Hard Knocks, our team captains were Jake Long, Reggie Bush, and Carlos Dansby. Those guys lasted a year. So Mike Wallace was vocal. We saw him get shipped out 2 days ago, and he put up 10 touchdowns last year. And I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it just comes down to what exactly is Joe Philbin doing to improve this team. I'm seeing the front office try to make moves. I'm seeing the owner being adamant about bringing in pieces, and we're all expecting a lot from Joe Philbin. And if he doesn't get the job done, you're going to see a lot of fires, similar in how Miami, ran Jeff Ireland out of town. I'd expect some of that backlash if the Dolphins underachieve again, because we're not a patient group, and Joe Philbin really hasn't done anything to show us otherwise.
Talking personnel moves and what your expectations are of the team now that you have a lot of these new players and a lot of these new additions, let's get into those. Number one, and I'm going to hit you with one of the bigger ones right to start with, is the trade of Mike Wallace to the Vikings for a 5th-round pick. And we talked to Christopher Gates for the SB Nation page for him, Daily Norseman, and we asked him, I was like, do you think that you got Mike Wallace for a steal? And he said, well, kind of and kind of not. So I kind of want to know what your answer is. Do you think that the Dolphins gave him away, or do you think that it was the right move, and here's why?
Miami gave him away, but it wasn't. The only reason we gave Mike Wallace away for a fifth-round draft pick was for the money. It was a money move. The last two trades that Miami was a part of was shipping out Janelle Ellerby and getting Kenny Stills and a third, and shipping out Mike Wallace and a fifth, for a fifth for Mike Wallace and our seventh-round draft pick. And both of those moves will fit differently with Dolphins fans, but to answer the Mike Wallace question, it was just money.
Lots and lots and lots of money owed there.
Yeah, I mean, we are trying to make some moves. We are one of the teams in the NFL that are going to be a little bit tighter on the cap. Obviously, we've made the big splash of free agency already, and we are trying to see how many pieces. We still have a little bit of holes in some areas. We're not a championship roster on paper yet, so there are still holes to be filled, possibly in free agency and definitely in the draft. So the Mike Wallace move, personally, if it was me, I would have found a way to keep him. He's a 10-touchdown receiver last year. His mouth or his attitude aside, he seemed, or at least in the media, that he was willing to renegotiate or restructure. But the way his salary is we needed to trade him, otherwise we get hit. So we couldn't really release him because it'd be a bad thing. So that's the only reason. That trade made it evident that the Dolphins, if they did not trade him for anything, they were going to release him. And he's not worth a fifth-round draft pick. He's a much better player than a fifth-round draft pick's going to get. So if you look at it like a value standpoint like that, you're never going to add up. But if you look at it as the fact is Miami was going to lose money, take a hit, and release a player like that so they can sign more players that fit their system, then, they got a fifth-round draft pick because it's better than nothing. And that's exactly the reason why I think Miami did it. And Mike Wallace would not have been a Miami Dolphin in 2015, no matter what. The front office made their mind, and Minnesota was the only team that was willing to, give us anything, it seems. I think someone said that the Ravens were interested in him, and there have been a bunch of teams, obviously, that scooped him up in free agency, but your value as a trade partner is pretty low when the team makes it clear that you're on the trading block. So I didn't expect anyone to call and say, hey, Mike Wallace is available. Here's a second-round draft pick or here's a third-round draft pick. I knew we were going to get bad value after I heard that report, but it seemed Miami was just trying to cut their final tie with, the free agents brought in by Jeff Ireland and start from scratch. That's the reason they did that. So if it was up to me, I would have tried to keep him just because our wide receiving core takes a big hit. But I see why they did it, and there's nothing we could do now. I liked all of Miami's other free agent moves, so kind of the one little thing to keep a little sour taste in your mouth. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's done, and we're moving on. And, Minnesota gets a pretty good receiver, and what he does in Minnesota, I guess we'll see.
You filled a vacancy, though, quickly with your own heist of Kenny Stills, and you went to the Saints, who are in a terrible cap situation, who we actually talked to the Saints rep from their page today as well, and we talked to them, and a lot of it seems to be boiling down to with him that Drew Brees and him just could not get along, and so they basically gave him away. What you seem to have lost with Wallace, you seem to also have gained with Stills,
but for way cheaper.
Way cheaper, yeah. Stills is making about $500,000 this year for the next 2 years. And Wallace is making a lot more than that. So we went from having surprisingly, the Miami Dolphins had the most expensive receiving core last year, between everybody, between Wallace and Hartline and Brandon Gibson, everything, just guys that were just overpriced on the free agency. So, and the different end of the spectrum, yes, trading Mike Wallace for that, not getting the best value, kind of stings a little bit. But I love the Stills trade. A third-round draft pick is pretty good value, especially in a draft that's deep. However, like you said, you nailed it. You're getting a receiver that fits Mike Wallace's, the type of player he is, quick, able to get downfield, especially with Miami doing the moves they're doing with exploring tight end options, and, getting a little bit more advanced in the short and intermediate routes. We still have our deep threat, Kenny Stills, and for about 1/20th of the price. So I like what they're doing. It's a good way to build your team, especially as we're trying to probably extend Tannehill. We have a couple young playmakers for him that are on, team-friendly deals right now. So it was just a flexibility move, and, getting rid of Wallace did stink, but getting Kenny Stills back and getting rid of Janelle Ellerby's contract the same way we did with Wallace. The only difference is Ellerby wasn't really producing on the field, so that was a great move for Miami, and we were all really happy. Even though the third-round draft pick was a little bit high, we were all happy with that move.
And another move that definitely is not just a good move, but kind of funny in the way it came about, is getting Jordan Cameron, because the way it looks like is that he announced his deal with the Browns to kind of give the Dolphins an idea as to what they needed to come to the table with, and then he immediately signed with them, really irritating Cleveland and being funny for everybody who is not Cleveland. So he's definitely bringing something to the table, and is going to you have to worry about injury concern, I guess, but he could be very productive and really give a good check down kind of option to Ryan Tannehill next year.
As if Cleveland needed another reason to hate Miami, huh?
Yes.
I guess we don't see the connection, so you're gonna have to explain it to us. I'm sorry.
I'm missing out on that, so I really need details.
Now we're curious. I want to know what you're talking about.
I know we're just thinking about football, but I was just talking about LeBron James.
Oh, okay. Yes, that was more obscure, but yes, definitely funny.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that actually, now that you say it, it's incredibly obvious, and we're both like, yeah, we're done.
Yeah, and don't worry about that. If you only heard some of the jokes that I attempt on this show, you'd be like, I'm a master at this compared to this guy. This guy's just awful.
It's all good. I mean, I love the Jordan Cameron pickup. I mean, he's an elite tight end. I mean, you look at a guy like Jordan Cameron, his size and his hands. He's really the closest thing you would be able to get to a Jimmy Graham kind of guy. If I would have known Jimmy Graham was available for trade, we could have explored that option, but that was a great pickup by Seattle as well. But Jordan Cameron he's a Pro Bowl receiver. Obviously, his only concerns are his concussions. Miami felt good, comfortable on the, with their medical decision to bring Cameron in. Someone made a good point about Daniel Thomas, our running back from Miami, was having concussion issues, and they were able to actually fit a special helmet for him, and it dramatically helped his conditions, and he hasn't had any concussion issues since then. So that could be playing a part to try to, develop things for Jordan Cameron to stay healthy, which is our main concern. But I love it. Miami has been desperate to get a big-bodied red zone receiver, and even though he's not a wide receiver out wide, Jordan Cameron could do a lot of those things that we needed. We haven't had a red zone target from a tight end position since Randy McMichael probably. So regardless of what Miami's planning on doing, if they're going to bring back Charles Clay or not, kind of have a plethora of options at the tight end position. The Jordan Cameron thing did come out of nowhere for a lot of us, but he was kind of option 1A, 1B with Charles Clay, and there's a chance that Miami is able to pull off both. But if not, Jordan Cameron pairs well with another big young target we have in Deion Sims, who had a pretty good 2014, looks to make the next step. And we're all happy with Cameron's decision to come to South Florida, and really interested in how he's going to put it on the field with Ryan Tannehill next year. So
with the Jordan Cameron deal, you have Charles Clay, who is still tendered, and not tendered, but tagged. And it's confusing to me because they tag him and then they go out and they get Jordan Cameron. Is this a kind of deal where they're looking to maybe trade Clay and pick up some draft picks to, further improve the team that I think they're building to try and murder Tom Brady on the football field? So what is your thought on that?
Well, I mean, it's more of a leverage ploy, I think. Buffalo and Miami has been back and forth, and Clay went to Buffalo, and we didn't get any any indication that he was offered, a deal for Miami to match. We haven't heard anything. So I think it's more along the lines of, a three-team standoff between Buffalo, Miami, and, Charles Clay and his agent trying to get the best deal, put the two teams against each other, which is, smart. And I guess football is a business. So, I mean, you're going to see things from this time to time. There was a good article on Deadspin that showed the Jordan Cameron process on how Cleveland allegedly had signed him. However, Jordan Cameron was in Miami at the time. So what seemed to happen was reports came out of Jordan Cameron's deal from Cleveland. He didn't sign it, and he's sitting in Miami saying, hey, this is my deal. Can you match it? And I think Jordan Cameron it's apparent Jordan Cameron, with the same deal, preferred Miami over Cleveland because Miami gave him the same deal. And, as far as Charles Clay, he's a fan favorite. He was banged up in 2014. 2013, he made the NFL top 100 players. So he's one of those guys that defenses have to account for. He's a jack of all trades guy. He's, a fan favorite here because he's got that hybrid role where he's almost like an H-back, but he can line out wide. He's a bowling ball. He's tough to tackle. He was banged up with some injuries last year. So I think Miami has Cameron, so they made a good ploy. Buffalo got rid of Chandler at the tight end position, and they're really thin. So they have more of a reason to bring back Charles Clay. So I think Charles and his agent know that. At the end of the day, I think Charles Clay likes Lazier's offense and would prefer to stay in Miami with Tannehill. And if there's, any indication of a similar deal, I think he would prefer Miami just as Jordan Cameron did. But it is interesting, and I'm kind of curious and not really sure how it's all going to play out. But, at the end of the day, Miami does have Jordan Cameron and Deion Sims, which is a respectable tight end unit. If they lose Charles Clay, that's an extra $7 million they can spend elsewhere. Like you said, get another, defensive option or possibly a guard, which is probably our thinnest spot in the team. But, if everything stands pat as it is, and we have Charles Clay back for a year, I mean, it helps out the thinning of our wide receiver core, as far as Cameron, Clay, Sims. There's a lot of things for Bill Lazor to be able to explore. So I think all of us really like that idea. New England tried that idea, and turns out one of their tight ends was a murderer, so that kind of canceled that idea out. It would be an interesting option, but we'll see what happens. We're happy with Cameron and Sims. If Clay comes on, it's kind of the icing on the cake. If not, it'll be tough to see him go to a rival, but it's more money for us to spend and possibly make another move.
Lastly, when we're talking personnel moves, we have to get to the big one, of course, and that is signing Ndamukong Suh. I've talked to Kyle at length. We discussed it on the show. We've talked about it off the show, and the contract is astronomical. I mean, outside of quarterbacks, no one gets paid this way, unless you're J.J. Watt or Rob Gronkowski. It seems like a lot. So the first thing I'll need you to do is explain why it's not, and then I want you to tell me how he fits the scheme, because the type of defense they play is much different than the type of defense that the Lions played. Is he slated to be more successful in this type of defense, or is it something where he's just going to be able to augment better, but all that money made it worth it because he's going to make everybody around him so much better?
Good question. Obviously Suh was the big daddy. A month ago, Suh's name was tossed out as, hey, Ndamukong Suh is a free agent, any chance that he comes to Miami. And on the surface, I follow the Dolphins religiously. On the surface, I will admit, I gave it about a 1% chance of happening. I just thought with the money that he would command, which he did, even the way we restructure it, I just felt like there were more bigger fish to fry. I would have loved a player like Ndamukong Suh. He fits the scheme, I think, just because if you have an Ndamukong Suh, he really can fit any scheme. And the way I mean that is he makes your defense better. I mean, I know it's cliche. I know a lot of other people have said that. Oh, he'll make your entire defense better. In a sense, I think it's true. The Dolphins have a young, weak linebacking core. For now, we had some unexpected jumps last year. Jelani Jenkins had a great season, and we expect him to do more of the same this year. And we still have some holes to fill, but as far as helping the linebacking core, helping our secondary improve, he does it. I mean, you pair him next to Cameron Wake, and the fact that Cameron Wake is the second best defender on your defensive line is, you can't even explain how awesome that is as a Dolphins fan. So your first question as far as the money, obviously Ndamukong Suh got paid. That's the reason he came to Miami. He borderline admitted it, and I got to give him respect for being able to tell the truth, while a lot of the free agents will beat around the bush. He came to Miami because he got paid, and he came to Miami because we paid him the most money. It is a lot of money, but the more and more I think about this, bringing him in, the more and more I think about the signing, I think it's brilliant. I think it's the smartest move that Miami's made in a few decades. And if you got a player to build around, the way I see it is you're going to bring and extend Tannehill, $100 million whenever he gets paid in an ideal situation, as long as he doesn't tank next year. You're going to pay him a similar contract to what you gave Sue, and you have your two young building blocks on offense. You have your most important position in your quarterback, which is the type of money that you're going to give to those players. And then you got a guy like Sue who you can plug in and literally build everyone around them. We got good pass rushers. Our defensive line is the strength of our team. It has been. You plug a guy like Sue in, and he immediately helps your run game, stopping your run, which was the main reason why Miami really failed at the end of the year last year, is we couldn't stop the run. We went from elite defense when we paired off against Detroit, and it was the battle of the defenses. We played a great game. It was just a fantastic football game. And the first 3 plays of that game, Ndamukong Suh stopped our running back for a 5-yard loss, sacked Tannehill, and got pressure. And it was, I guess, one of the games where you look at the strengths of each team. And $114 million is a lot, but nowadays free agency really has changed. And you have to realize that before you say, and you put a number on, $60 million guaranteed, $114 million. Oh, that's way too much. You have to realize that the name of the game is changed. Free agency has completely changed, where you can structure contracts in a certain way to benefit your team. Miami has a well-known name for us, but a name that you probably haven't heard of unless you're a Dolphins fan, Donna Ponte, and she actually handles all the cap for the Miami Dolphins. She does an excellent job at handling the cap. There's been a bunch of articles on her that people have tried to actually pry her away and get her a front office position, GM position, or something along those lines, because she's so good at what she does. And Miami has been very fortunate to be able to have these high contracts that we bring in from free agency, but we're able to make them work. And if you're able to make a contract work and you bring in a guy like Ndamukong Suh, it's a no-brainer. It's a lot of money, but we're able to structure him nowadays the way that helps our team. And if you look at a young piece to build apart, if you have Ryan Tannehill on the offense, I think Ndamukong Suh is the perfect fit. And it really was an unexpected, awesome start to free agency. I know it's still a free agent acquisition and it's still one player, but we were really thrilled, and I personally am ecstatic the way that we were able to make that happen.
Well, definitely when you land the big jewel of free agency, it's cause for celebration, at least in the short term. You obviously have to keep the perspective that more often than not, free agency is not the best way to win. But this team has been making aggressive moves, free agency, trade. They have been making smart moves on top of that. Really, it seems as though there's a very public declaration. It is almost confusing in nature. It seems as though the Dolphins are calling out New England and saying, "We are coming." Normally, this isn't the sort of thing you do when the team that you are struggling against just won the Super Bowl. But the Patriots are starting to show their age, maybe a little here and there. Obviously, that game against Kansas City earlier in the year was a disaster for New England, one of the worst losses that either Tom Brady or Bill Belichick have ever been a part of. And so now we're looking at the Dolphins, and they are very clearly making a push to take the division and hopefully the entire AFC. Looking ahead, pre-draft and all that, I understand you can only have the faintest of guesses, but what do you see being a realistic expectation for this team? And on top of that, where is the minimum line? There's so much involved with the head coach on the hot seat and the free agent acquisition. What are the fans going to demand in terms of wins before they are willing to declare the season a success?
Cut ties. Yeah, well, I mean, that's another good question. Before free agency started, I had a prediction for Miami, and that stays true today. And I stated that if Miami has a productive draft where they're able to get production from all levels of their draft picks, good production, that they're a playoff team. Even with the Ndamukong Suh signing, even with bringing in, targets like Jordan Cameron and Kenny Stills, I still think that remains the same. Miami has a few holes that they still need to address, and I think it will come down to the draft, in drafting smart, drafting to fill positions of need, and getting able to get production from the draft. Last year was a good draft for Miami. We got Juwan James, which kind of was one of those Miami Dolphins picks. Oh man, a tackle at 14 or whatever we picked, and he ended up working out. Jarvis Landry, as I expressed earlier, has just been absolutely everything we've wanted in a strong receiving core, rookie receiving group last year. He was kind of underrated because he was terrific in Miami and is exactly the receiver we needed. And before that, Miami had a tendency of drafting players and not necessarily playing players. We have so many incompletes from the years ago. Everyone remembers how we traded up for Deion Jordan in a weak draft, which, believe it or not, I'm one of the few people that still will stand by that decision. And for the value we got, I think that was a smart decision. However, on the other end of the spectrum, he hasn't really had the playing time, and we still have the jury out on a guy like Deion Jordan. So Miami needs to, draft players that are going to help us in 2015. Redshirting our guys when we're putting so much money in free agency isn't going to help us. So I think Miami, if we get an awesome draft and our draft picks, we hit the nail on the head. And looking back, you give our draft an A or at the most a B+ or something. This team can go 10-6. The team can win 11 games. If we have an average draft, or one guy maybe is a hit, and the rest are kind of up in the air. I mean, AFC East all got better last year. I hate to say it. I hate the Jets, but they had a great offseason. Buffalo brought pieces in. New England didn't do anything, but they're the Super Bowl champs, and we've seen this every year that they really don't have to. They'll make a couple pickups that fit their system, and they'll win another 12 games next year. So Miami is still in that, anywhere between 7 wins in a worst-case scenario and 11 wins in a best-case scenario situation. And I think that depends on the productivity of our 2015 NFL draft.
Is there a specific player that the fans on the boards have really been hoping for, or a position that the fans are really saying, if we just got this, we'd have so much figured out, we'd be so much closer? I mean, player or position that you think the Dolphins need to be targeting in this upcoming draft?
Obviously, Miami traded Mike Wallace, and receiver is definitely an option, even as soon as our first-round draft pick. It's another good draft for receivers. We'll see where the spots start falling, but a guy whose stock rose a lot the last few weeks, especially with Mike Wallace departing, is Devontae Parker from Louisville. He's a jump ball receiver. He kind of reminds me of an AJ Green. He might not be as crisp as a route runner as Green was at Georgia, but he's one of those guys with incredible hands, incredible leaping ability. He's got the best hands and leaping ability I've seen since Odell Beckham came out last year. So he's definitely an option to look at. At the other side of the ball, Dolphins still really need, this team would be so awesome with a young linebacker. We haven't really had anyone to fit that role. Kolomisi's been okay and as middle linebacker, but he has injury concerns, and it would just benefit Miami to get younger on the side of the ball and have a linebacker kind of man the middle of the field right behind Dominican Sue. So I think the best linebacker in the draft this year is Eric Kendricks from UCLA, and he could be an awesome option. I mean, a lot of people are pinning him a little bit farther back, but it wouldn't surprise me if Miami goes that route. So I think with our first 2 draft picks, we should go receiver and linebacker in that order, or even in any order. If you pick linebacker first, look for Miami to get one of the second-round receivers, or if we go with Devontae Parker, or even if Amari Cooper drops to 14, which I would say is unlikely, but not out of the realm of possibility, Miami could, second that up with either a guard or a linebacker in the second round. So, cornerback's an issue, safety is an issue, although they might re-sign someone. We probably need a backup for Tannehill, which we can get in later rounds if we don't bring back Matt Moore, who's currently a free agent. So I would say wide receiver and inside linebacker at the moment are Miami's 2 biggest needs. Our biggest hole would be a guard, although, there are some rumors out there that we're trying to make some moves in the off season as well. So, but either way, I would pick up a guard, a wide receiver, and an inside linebacker as your top 3 priorities in the NFL draft this year.
We're actually pushing up against the clock here, so we're gonna have to start wrapping up here. And you just I don't think Kyle and I were prepared for how much you were gonna be willing to give us today. Like we had from the stark contrast between our last interview and you is just astronomical. So it's so
okay,
great,
so
and it's
try to
great.
answer your questions.
Oh yeah, you answer them. Kyle and I are just sitting back. We're just like, well, we ask a question. We
just constantly deleting. Like, well, he answered this question. All right. But, oh, no, now he answered this question. All right, fine. Just checking stuff off. So we actually spent a good portion of the interview just sitting back and editing our question sheet. So I am A-okay with that.
So what we want to do at this point is just get your real quick. We just want to get your take on what is the expectation for next year. You have all of this new stuff, all these shiny new toys. You're going to get a lot of shiny new toys when it comes to the draft. You're going to have probably at least 1 or 2 other big moves in some way, shape, or form as the offseason progresses. What is the expectation from your side as a writer, from your colleagues, and then also from the fans, because you have a unique ability to really connect with the fans through the page. I want to know what people are saying should happen next year. What is our realistic top and bottom kind of cutoff?
Well, with the Dolphins, you can do either way. I think a lot of it has to do with coaching. I think it's easy. I think it's playoffs. The Dolphins need to make the playoffs. We have not made the playoffs since 2008. Obviously we're in a tough division. AFC East is getting better on all ends of the spectrum. We still have to go against the Super Bowl champions twice. But I mean, we have a young quarterback. We have the second best quarterback in the division. It's pretty apparent that that's the case. Miami needs to make these steps. We have a good defense with one of the best defensive players in football to build around. Obviously, we didn't make some moves in the draft to hit on them, but Miami needs to make the playoffs. Fans are relentless. We're getting kind of impatient. We're happy the way we're making moves, and we're kind of having a different approach. We're still spending money this year, but it feels different the way we're doing it. Instead of just giving a flashy receiver who doesn't really fit the scheme a bunch of money to make fans happy, we're actually doing things that are a little bit smarter. So we're happy with the offseason, but when week 1 starts, that expectation is not going to change. Miami needs to make the playoffs this year or have at least a winning season, and if that does not happen, Joe Philbin will most likely be sent packing somewhere, and the future will be, kind of up in the air to see what happens with Ryan Tannehill and moving forward. But it's simple. Miami needs to make the playoffs, and once the playoffs start, we all know anything can happen from there.
Just to kind of comment on something you said there was that they need to have a winning season, at least a winning season, not necessarily the playoffs, but at least a winning season. So if you get stuck in a situation kind of like what the NFC West was stuck in, or previously the NFC East has been in this situation before, where they've had 3 teams that were 10 wins or more, and one of them just was the odd man out. That you think fans would be okay with that if the Dolphins went 10-6, but just lost the tiebreaker to somebody, you would be okay with that?
Well, I'm not sure how fans would take it as okay with that, but I think that's the difference between Joe Philbin having the job or not. If Joe Philbin has 9, 10 wins, and the Dolphins, for some reason, are the odd man out of the playoffs, I think you can make a big case. But, I mean, even if Stephen Ross is publicly endorsing Joe Philbin, if he puts anything less than 9 wins on the table next year, I can probably personally put my money on the table that he will not be back. A winning season has to do with our coach sticking along. If obviously we make the playoffs in a best case scenario, everyone's happy, and Joe Philbin can get a chance to see if he can be that guy. But if Joe Philbin has expectations as well, he needs to produce just like the players do. If he does not put a winning team on the field next year, then he's as good as gone. And I could probably say that's a good prediction, and I think most fans would agree with that.
Well, now at this point, let's open the floor up to you. We'd like you to tell everybody how they can get in touch with you, your Twitter, your website, anything you feel you need to go over right now. Now is your time.
Okay. Well, appreciate you guys for having me. Sorry for talking too much if I did, but hopefully I answered.
Oh, no, you did great. And we really appreciate, like I said, we really appreciate all the insight. We don't ever get upset that somebody is passionate about their team like you are.
That's the best time to talk to Dolphins fans is in the off season. It's when we're all optimistic and we're all happy-go-lucky. And then, when we have our 8-8 season next year, probably I wouldn't give you a call because I'll probably have a different kind of aspect on some of the conversations. But like I said, I appreciate you coming, calling me and chatting Dolphins football. I represent the Phinsider, which is our SB Nation Dolphins blog. So there's a lot of great dialogue, and these guys do an awesome job on that website to, keep everything with up-to-date news. So that's the Phinsider, Phinsider, Phinsider with a PH. So that's a great website if anyone wants to get some more information on Dolphins football. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is BSerious72. That's my Twitter handle. So, but mostly, just be I get a little fired up over the off season and the NFL draft and everything, so that'll be a good chance to follow me. But that's about it. I appreciate you guys chatting with me.
And we appreciate you coming on the show. We really do.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. Yeah.
No problem, guys. Go Dolphins.
All right, you take care, Brian, and we're gonna get you back on here at some point, probably after the draft. We're gonna be picking your brain, so be ready.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, take care.
Bye, guys.
Once again, that was Brian Naidus representing the Phinsider.com of SB Nation. A lot of fun having Brian on. I will say at the end, I got to the point where I'm like, I don't even think we need to give him questions. We can just set up a name and he's going to answer everything we were going to ask, and then probably a few things we didn't even know to ask. He, if anything, was too well informed. I don't think such a thing exists, though.
Yeah, we could have tossed a softball to him and given him an entire tree to hit it with at this point. It was he knows so much about, and he's so passionate that just single bullet points would have been enough for him, and we could have gotten everything we wanted, and we almost don't need anything for him. But that's great. He knows his stuff. He's passionate about it, and that's what we want. We want somebody that's going to come on here and be like, "This is why my team will be great," or "This is why my team will be bad," and he makes that topic interesting with all of the different viewpoints that he gives. So
I just wish that we had a little more time, because talking pre-show, he had a couple of good jokes, one of them about the Colts, and we just did not find the time. So that is unfortunate. Maybe we'll be able to address that again at a later time. Hey, for all of those of you joining us from the Phinsider, Football is America is our podcast. We do. Guess what? It's about football. Hooray.
all of the footballs.
Well, all the
not
pro,
not the college
or the basket or the base. We don't. Well, you said the footballs, not the balls. I don't know. I just
you got lost there for a second. Did you have a small stroke?
I might have had a stroke. I think this is once again Tom Brady practicing his witchcraft on me. For those of you from the Phinsider, you don't know, I am a Colts fan and I hate Tom Brady. So we already have something in common, bonded by mutual hatred. So why don't you come on, take a listen to our shows. If that doesn't pique your interest, then you don't love the Dolphins or hate Tom Brady enough. I'm just going to say it.
Relationships built on hate. That's what every third world country is made of.
Yeah, so let's come blood diamond this thing up together. Let's have you check us out, footballisamericapodcast.com. Football is America Podcast is your search on iTunes, on Stitcher, FBIA Podcast on Twitter. We're all over the place. Come find us. You're going to have a good laugh. You're going to have a good time.
FBIApodcast@gmail.com. Make sure you send all of your questions and hate mail to Kyle, because I'm amazing and a professional, and I am always nice. So you never have to send me hate mail.
You were talking about other people. I'm just not.
Yep. Okay. Well, that's gonna do it for us, everybody. Thank you for joining us, especially those from the Phinsider, all of our military, our listeners. Thank you, everybody that helps us put this together. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.
Good night.